Hi there, friends. Roxanne Steed here. I'm going to share a little painting demo with you that I had promised my current class that I'm teaching that I would do a little demo on this. And it's of a cherub sitting on a sphere. I had seen one that was on the patio of our B&B in Florence on a recent trip to Italy in October. And I went looking through all my reference photos thinking I certainly took a picture of it. Well, I didn't. I had like half pictures of it because I had taken photos of the plant next to the cherub because I had painted this from life sitting out on the patio. Anyway, and we only stayed there a couple days. Anyway, let me see. Okay. So this was a little angel that I just sat on the patio and was kind of at the end of the day that I was working on it. So I was kind of losing light. And of course, whenever you're working outside, the light changes dramatically. And I had to go looking for a reference photo. So I finally found one, this little cherub. It's pretty similar to what I had or what I saw in Florence. So I thought, let's give this a shot. So what I do whenever I'm looking at something, and you know, honestly, I tell you, I've painted from life so much, I actually find it easier to paint from life. I don't get so hung up with details. Whenever I'm working from photos, I have to stop myself from trying to literally copy a photo. And that's what I see most students doing as well. Working from life gives you a little bit of, it's more immediate. You are actually looking at an object rather than a photo that's all flattened out. So when you're working from life, everything is three-dimensional, and here it's all flat. So what I do though, I kind of do the same thing as I visually measure, you know, when something is a certain height, you know, roughly how tall are the parts. So on this page, I've got a ruler and we've got, you know, this object is roughly 8 inches high. And then the little cherub is about, you know, the top 4 inches of that. So it's roughly half and half. So what I do is decide, you know, how much space do I want to fill in my paper? Do I want to fill it? Do I want it a little smaller? I'm going to say, let's go a little smaller. So I'm going to have my cherub fit from here to here. And when I have a distance, I'm going to look and see, you know, what is roughly halfway point. So that means the bottom half is going to be the sphere, the top half is going to be the angel. So let me get the sphere on here because I want the ball of it. And then there's a pedestal. And I'm just going to go around until, and I'm going to pencil lightly. I've got a number 2 pencil, just a little mechanical pencil. And I'm going to keep it really light so that I can erase later when I'm ready to paint. And there's the sphere. Let's look for where the pedestal comes. So when I'm looking for, you know, where does this base fit? I'm looking at these negative shapes and kind of where on the arc does this come? If I make it too skinny, then my pedestal is going to be, you know, kind of off. Make sure that I can get all of this in here. All right, slide that up a bit. So I think my pedestal rim is going to come about there. And this is going to be, you know, have a rounded edge like a smiley. And then I've got this bigger base that comes out. And it, if you'll notice, the edge of the base comes midway of this lip here. So here's a little lip. And so I'm just comparing the parts. So usually everything in a drawing is kind of relative. All right, so let's, you know, I'm going to try to make it as symmetrical as we can. I think this maybe should stick out a little further. I want my sides even. You know, what's interesting, I'm noticing now, um, we're looking in at an angle. So at first, you know, you initially think it's straight on, but as I'm looking at, you know, dropping a plumb line from here down, I've got a little space. There's like a little crack of space here. And when I drop this down, the edge of the pedestal is right there equal to the ball. So I'm, you know, the viewpoint is at a slight angle. So, you know, what was funny is as I'm drawing, it's like, wait, is that really going on? Is this as wide as I think it is on this side? So this roughly comes, yeah, about, just make a little mark so I know where I want this edge of this to come. Restate my sphere here. And I don't want to get too hung up on measuring because after all, this is, well, this I'm actually doing on paper, but you know, if I were doing it in a sketchbook, you know, maybe I would want a whole lot of detail, maybe not. So now I want to figure out this cherub that's at the top of my, you know, it's the top half of this statue, is where do things fit? So usually when I'm doing anything that has like a human figure, I use the head as my measuring point. And we've got part of the chin just a little bit covered up, but I'm going to guesstimate where that chin is. So it's, you know, and I could use a ruler or I could just as easily use my pencil. So if I were to use a pencil, and I'm not looking at numbers, I'm just comparing this length from the top of the head to roughly the chin. And I'm comparing, okay, compared to arms, is that almost the same as the two arms? So we're not seeing these arms straight on. They are, you know, this elbow is coming straight, almost straight forward at you. It's not quite straight on, you know, it's not quite like in your face, but we're seeing it at an angle. So this is angling back. So this is closer to us and that's a little farther away. So let's see, you know, this is the size of the head and the elbows are going to be here. What other measurements, you know, can I compare? If I start at the elbow, the wing is a little bit longer. Let's leave the wing for last. That's just like an added detail. Now let's take that head and see how far that body from shoulder to the end of the rump, it's all, you know, it's just a little bit longer. Maybe if I go from, okay, top of the head to roughly the chin, and then chin to rump, okay, well, that's a little bit closer because he's just folded up. And then let's look at this leg from toe to knee. It's almost that. And, you know, this knee is going back. It's underneath those arms. So I'm looking at these shapes and I'm going to softly, this head is going to be at an angle and this body is going to be at an angle. This little rump, well, he's really twisted. It's kind of an odd statue. Let's get this little form. I'm just going to make these big ovals. And we're going to base this body off of that. I'm trying to get like an eggy oval in here. And if I'm going, let me just check that again. So from shoulder to rump is a little bit longer. And that shoulder tucks up by that ear. So I'm just looking at all these comparison places, and my head is the unit of measurement. So I might end up having to make this head a little bit bigger. Or maybe the rump actually come up a little bit. Let's try that. I think that's going to actually, no, I think we made may need to make the head a little bit bigger. Okay, because the other landmark I need to see is where does this come down on the edge of this sphere? So I think this is a good point where it comes down. So I want to make this head just a little bit bigger. Well, let's say let's just say almost that size. Now we do see just a little bit more of this side of the head than that side of the head. So I'm thinking about that too. And we're going to draw the eye line. The eyes are halfway down on the whole eggy oval. And then halfway between the chin and the eye line, you'll see the nose. And then between the nose and the chin, we're going to find that mouth. I'm just going to make a little line where I want it to be. And I'm going to keep this midline. Oops. I'm going to keep that midline coming down here just really lightly. And I'm going to just place on the eye sockets. And I'm just keeping that really soft. Now let's get this body. We've got this shoulder that's poking up by the ear. So the ears are going to come in. The top of the ear attaches right at where this the eyes go back. And then the bottom of the ear is going to be sort of across from the base of the nose. You can kind of see how that lines up. That's pretty typical with the human form. So let's get that shoulder, the shoulder's kind of tucking down behind there. It sort of comes down this way and rounds into this back. And then we've got this little arm. We've got these elbows wrapping across here. And then the legs, I'm going to just draw this. I want to remember the length of the head, and that compared about the length of this knee to toe joint. So let's find this length of the head. And that's going to give us a little bit of information about where this foot's going to come. And you can also use, this relative placement on the sphere. So you've got this foot hanging about halfway down this globe. All right, let's mark that in here. And I'm going to have just this little line of, we want this head to be leaning against, part of the arm. We see that fleshy little bit of elbow coming up. So I'm just trying to flesh out these. Flesh out this space. And I want to remeasure this length of this arm. So if I take the head and I go elbow to elbow, that's going to be a little bit longer. So let me take a measure of this head and then look at elbow to elbow and bring it out just a little bit. Let's get this arm. Might have to bring that angle up a little bit, because I want that head kind of tucked against that. So let me erase that first rendition just so it's not confusing. So we've got that little rounded part of the arm, that really fleshy baby fat. That little elbow that pokes out, almost like the tip of a lemon. Got that, and then this lower arm just gets tucked under there. And then the other shoulder's kind of back there. So we can round out his little baby face, and then we're going to be just indicating curls and hair. All right, and let's get this little one leg comes out from under this arm, and it's going to be tucking under. And so when I'm looking at this leg, there's a slight curve, but it's almost coming straight down. And this one's crossing over that way. So let's find, up where this hand comes under and that little chubby wrist goes. Just making myself some little road marks. This leg comes out. And where that heel tucks under, you can see the little ankle bone here. This little foot from this leg, the cherub's right leg, that's coming down here. And this calf goes and tucks up under here. And you've got this really fleshy bit. So move any of the erroneous lines. And let's get that other little foot. So that little foot is going to, see the heel there. And the little toes. Okay, so there we go. We see, the toes of that foot. Get any extra lines out of here. All right, so we've roughly got our little cherub. Let's get this thigh. Oh, that's what we've got here. Okay, so yeah, this is the thigh coming out. It looked like something altogether different, and I just wasn't sure about this statue. So this, it's hard to see in the photo, but this thigh, this edge here is the edge of this leg. So it's all part of the thigh, and his rump comes down here, and this goes extending up into the back. So there we've got our little figure. Now let's throw on a wing. Most people we see don't have wings, but these wonderful little statues are so cute. So it's right about that comes off the back of his ear. And let's do a little measurement. Remember, our head is kind of our standard unit of measurement. And if we go from maybe this corner out to the end, so the wing is going to be a little bit shorter than that distance. So I'm just looking, whenever I'm measuring something complex like this, I'm kind of just using one thing to measure against other shapes. So I'm going to, from here to here is a little bit shorter than the length of the head. So I'm just going to go with that. And let's get our, and then let's look for other landmarks. If I, make a straight line from the top of the head to the top of the wing, maybe the wing is a little bit higher. So it kind of, I see a little triangle of space in here. So when I look for negative shapes to help me figure out, am I kind of in the ballpark? Yeah, I'm gonna make sure this little wingtip comes up just a little bit higher. So not a whole bunch higher, but just a little bit. So there's a little bit of a fold from the edge of this feather. Now let's see where the other part connects. So partway down on his shoulder blade, where it would be on his back. So roughly from the armpit, go around there, and we will find the edge of this. So I'm gonna just follow this shape up. It sort of rounds out about here, and then angles down. So I'm roughly just trying to catch this little bit of extension where these wing feathers. So if you think of a bird, these, and I don't remember the names of these flight feathers, they're the stiffer ones. Then you've got this little, it's a shorter flap, but we've got these. And then within there, we've got this little row. So you can kind of add the rows in. You can get as exacting as you want, but so we'll just kind of suggest these. So here's where, I'm kind of putting some detail in. But, I don't want to go jumping into detail too soon until I get like the whole, really get the feel for this. So we've got, a little bit of a horizon line back here. I don't want to get too carried away with a whole bunch of stuff, but, and, we don't need to have a tree coming out of his head. So we're just going to keep the background really simple. Maybe do kind of two tones. I mean, it must be either they used a flash, which could be because this is really blown out, or it's like an overcast day and we're not getting a whole lot of cast shadow at all. So I mean, maybe a little bit, but it's not, there's no hard shadows in there. So once I get my lines in here and I kind of have a little placement, I'm gonna just start. I don't want to throw in a lot of drawing because I'm going to go and paint this. But I am going to erase back any of these little extra, any extraneous lines that I don't want in my final painting. So I'm going to take my kneaded eraser and start looking for some of these little, I'm going to squish it down to a point so I can get some of this. Now I've drawn this head more like an adult head, and this little cherub really has a super rounded head. So I'm going to round this out just a bit. Not a whole lot, but just a bit. And his eyes are closed. There's a little brow line here. And I might just, darken that line so maybe it appears like his eyes are closed, like in the photograph, in the statue. Now, I also see that in this, his hand is up near his mouth, and I have really raised up the head just a bit. Now, I could change all this, but for me right now, it's not as important a drawing to go chasing all that down, but you certainly could. It's going to be my cherub. So when I get to this point in a drawing, I always tell my students, you can decide if you want to ink this in or if you want to just have pencil and paint it in first. And I think I'm just going to paint it. And then decide later if I want ink or if it can just really stand on its own. So I'm going to lighten some of my darker graphite lines by kneading this down and just kind of press. Just press on my drawing. I don't want to take the drawing away altogether, but I want to lighten it up enough so that I don't have, I don't really need distinctive pencil lines. I want them kind of faint, but I still want to be able to see what I'm looking at. Let's lighten that just a little bit. Okay. There we go. And I maybe want to darken this because I don't want to lose this. Where that hand tucks in. And take away some of those extra lines that I don't need. Because once you get paint on there, then you can't really erase anything. So this is a really pale version. If you remember my, the one that I had that I painted in Italy, it was a much warmer material. It was more of an ochre color. I don't know what this is, if it's plaster or cement or what, but it's a very, very stark white color. And the one there was, again, I'm not sure what it was made of, but it was a much warmer toned color. Or maybe it was just that warm Italy vibe that I was feeling while I was there. But anyway, let's get some water. I've got my scrap paper underneath, and I am going to mix up a gray. In fact, I've got one on here. Let's see if it's subtle enough. I'm going to also put a little roll of tape so that all my paint runs down and not, back and forth. And I think I'm going to go in and give a real pale wash. Let me wet my paints. And I've got some leftover puddles. Let's see if I can move this over. I want my reference picture nearby, but I also want to have my paints in here so that you can see them. So you can see what I'm mixing up. That's better. Okay. All right, got my water over here. And I always paint with a paper towel in my hand. So let's see if I can mix up. I've got this two colors mixed up, and you can see it's sort of a grayish shade. And so when I'm testing it here on my test swatch paper, it's a really nice soft gray. And so what I'll mix for my really lively gray is burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. And it's watered down a lot, so we're just getting a really soft bit. So I am going to bring this soft bit over much of this little cherub. And I'm just going to tone them down. And if it gets a little too dark, I'm going to take a damp brush and then pull some of that out. So I'm just coming in really quickly. And I'm going to cover the whole thing. Now, as it dries, it's going to dry about 20% lighter. So even though it looks like, oh, I got plenty of pigment on there now, it's going to be really faint. Now, if there are some areas where you really want to, pull out the lights and make it a little bit lighter, because there are some areas where there is just a little bit of light happening. I'm taking a damp, clean brush. I'm pulling out any of the extra moisture. And while this is still pretty wet, I am pulling back some of this paint just a little bit. This top of this wing edge is pretty light. And if it's dried quickly and I'm not able to move it, I can do a tickle and blot by just taking the damp brush and then blotting that carefully to lift a little bit more. And now what I want to do is find the areas that have a little bit more pigment. So I'm going to be looking for any of these shadow areas. Like when I squint my eyes down, I'm seeing the darkest dark right here. So it's kind of next to this wing and this edge of the face. So this is kind of your focal point right in here, because you've got this nice darkest dark of the cherub right next to this, lit wing and, this face. So usually when we have a human-like face, the face is going to be the focal point, and usually it's one eye. We've also got these little dark corners under here, under the foot. This side of the sphere is, more because you've got this foot hanging out, casting a bit of shadow. So there's there's somewhat of a shadow under here as this sphere goes down. You can also see, as you're squinting, the lower side of the sphere as it comes underneath the part that sticks out. It's, rather lit. I kind of wonder if a flash bulb was used when they took this photo, because it's just it's kind of highly washed out for something that's sitting outside in the daylight. So anyway, let's get, I'm going to go to a smaller brush now. Except actually, I'm going to keep my size 8 for just one more thing. I'm going to add a little bit of dark to this underneath the wing. So now, as you know, some of this starts drying, I'm going to come in and just go with a little bit more detail. I want to have this darker place underneath that little wing fold. And the shoulder, it's really well lit. Now, as this comes out, extends to the bits, the underside, extends to the wingtips, I'm going to soften those edges. And I'm just taking a damp, clean, a clean, damp brush that I've dried out. It's not totally dry, and I'm just going to soften those edges that I just laid down. And then we're going to just let that dry. Now I'm going to get my smaller brush and start looking for details. And, when I pick up some, new color, I just want to make sure I've got still this lightness there. Let's look for the edges of the hairline. We've got this little curls that come out. I'm using a size 4 brush. It's a 4 round. So this helps me get lots of little detail. This underside, that's leaning towards the ground has a little bit more shadowing in it. And then when we look at the eye sockets, let's look at this little eye socket in here. There's, some shadow on this side of the nose. It's like a little shadow under the brow. Under the edge of the nose. So now, since I didn't follow exactly with the shape of, I've got his arm a little bit lower. I'm going to have to, I'm just going to put some of this in shadow. I'm going to soften the edge of that. And let's get underneath the hand that's tucked in here. This lower edge of this arm. About half of that's in shadow. He's got these little chubby cherub fat rolls. Let's draw those in. So we can just, kind of play with these shapes with our small brush. Now, let's see. There is like a little bitty shadow in the corner of his face. Kind of behind his ear, too. There's a little shadow within the ear. Let's indicate some of those curls that come down. Now, there's a little bit of shadow behind the arm. And I'm going to soften that so it doesn't look like tiger stripes or something going up his back. I keep saying his. I have no idea of this gender of this baby, this cherub. I do a little spot right there that I want to soften up. Now, the underside of this leg, I want to get a really nice big sweep. And I want to make sure I can soften that edge really quickly. There's going to be a little bit of, let's see, let's kind of deal with this arm now. This arm comes out a little bit. The lower edge is in shadow until it reaches that part of the arm that's kind of above and getting hit with a light. Go back and soften that edge with a damp brush. And you can see already there, it's coming to life. It's just, you know, they're cute. All right, so under here, we've got some shadowing in here. So the shadows are what really help us define the shape. And again, I'm still, you know, using this little puddle of, it was just leftover burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. The two of them together make just wonderful, you know, just really wonderful grays. They're like two really workhorse colors. Now, even though that arm was in shadow, it's casting a shadow. So I'm just kind of looking for that shadow shape, which kind of helps define the arm and the other leg. And I want to soften this edge, sweater fuzz. All winter, I'm like pulling sweater hairs out of my paintbrush. All right, so we got that. Now we've got a cast shadow under this other arm. So let's find the edge of that and a little bit darker. And it kind of comes down by the elbow where it's cast and sort of goes into this little space there. And I want to soften this backside here. I want to soften this leg here. And then this little bit where in between the knee, you know, where the calf, so right under the knee, you've got the calf and the back of the thigh. We've got a little dark space right in there. And I've got, you know, with everything wet, this is flowing like crazy. So I'm just going to pull that down. I might have to wait a little bit until that dries just a bit. I'm going to soften that edge while we're waiting for things to dry up. And I'll come back to that in a minute. Let's kind of play with the feet here. And this leg. So as I'm kind of starting at the top and working down, as we pull that out, as we come down this leg, there's a little bit of shadow on this shin bone because it's underneath this arm and it's away from the light. It's not in deep shadow, but it's just very soft and faint. So I'm going to bring that in. Now let's look at the toe line across here. Just going to kind of indicate that. I don't think I'm going to draw every toe in though. I might just like indicate the edges. I am going to indicate that ankle bone because that is, you know, your ankle bone is quite a landmark. Now I'm going to soften that toe line that I just added. And then on this foot that's underneath, there's a little bit of cast shadow, not much, because it's, you know, the light is hitting it. And actually there's more shadow underneath this calf as it rolls up. And then there's a little bit of cast shadow down here on that foot. So let's kind of see if we can get some of that. Little toe line and that going up. It's kind of what defines that other foot. So I'm going to lay down that little wash and I'm going to soften it. And let's just get that downward slope of the toes soften that in there. Now, let's see if I can do that calf there. Getting down to the end of my little lovely puddle of gray. All right, so I'm going to bring in this bit of shadow. And it's very watery. It's like tea, like watery, like watered down tea. And I think it needs to be a little bit darker. And so I'm going to need to mix more of my colors. I'm going to pull in a little burnt sienna. I'll pull in a little bit of ultramarine blue. I want a little more blue because I want it to be a cool tone. I don't want it to be a soft brown. I want it to be actually a cooler gray. I'll pull in a little more blue, and then I'm going to water it down like tea. If you watch my video tutorial on the secret to watercolor, you'll see what I'm talking about when I talk about tea. It's watered down, a really watered down wash, kind of like weak tea. All right, let's hit this back of this calf again, just a little bit. I'm going to bring that in. And then I'm going to soften that edge as I pull that up. Now, let's see, it's a little bit softer. All right, so now let's approach the sphere. I'm happy enough with what's going on with our little cherub. He's looking cherub-like, and let's get that. I'm going to go to a bigger brush because it's one big shape, and we're going to see most of, when I squint, I'm seeing the darkest shadow under that foot. There's, a little bit in here, but, the light's kind of hitting this. So this is going to be where most of the shadowing is. So let's go underneath that foot. Hopefully my feet are dry enough. So I'm going to come under there. Bring that as around as I can. And then I'm going to hit the edge and just soften that as much as I can. I want to be careful about shooting water back into this, or I'm going to end up with, blooms, and it's not quite what I want to go with, but. All right, and then I do want to just bring a little bit underneath the edge there. So I'm going to go back to the small brush. And it's got to be a little bit different. I think most of the darker edge is actually on the skin, this underneath, when this fleshy part of the thigh, this is the darker bit, and on the calf too. And the light's hitting here, so I don't want to have too much. There's a little bit of cast shadow underneath the bend of that knee. So we're just going to come in there. There's a little dark spot in here. I might have to wait till this is bone dry before I can really get that in there. Let's pull that back. And I'm seeing a little bit of where I've actually missed a spot here. Just totally missed it. So let's pull that. See if I can soften that. And might do a tickle and blot to get this lifted out a little bit. Now, as your watercolor is drying, remember I said it's going to dry about 20% lighter. So there's going to be that adjustment. So once everything is bone dry, then you're going to want to see, well, what's going on now. So now we've still got this bottom part of the pedestal. We've got shadowing under here, a little bit of it's cast shadow from the ball. And then there's the cast shadow from the rim that sticks out. And then there's like a little bit of a rim around that outer edge. So let's see what we can do with that. Let's come under here. I might need to grow my puddle of gray again. I'm still going to keep it a pretty light consistency. Maybe not quite coffee. Oh, I don't want to get it too, I don't want to change the consistency too much, but I do need a bit of punch on this shadow here. So I'm going to bring that down under, pull off the sweater fuzz. Oh, gee. I got a hairy sweater that's kind of shedding into the paint. All right, let's catch this again. I'm going to bring it up under that edge. And then this outer bit, as it comes away, I'm going to soften that edge, or make that attempt to anyway. Now, as that rim comes out, it's, there's some white under there. And so the shadow only extends part of there, and it's really light right out here, which really is defined by the depth of color in the grass. So, and you can see that my pencil lines that I've drawn on here. So let's get to this little under bit of shadow here, and then this little bit of demarcation there, and that'll help define things too. So this little bit is going to come underneath. Let's get a little more paint on here. It's going to come underneath the part of that rim. And then let's soften that as it comes away from, the underneath side. Trying to keep it round. Sometimes you get a little wiggle in your brush, and you can fix things to a certain degree. All right, so we're going to bring that out here. Trying to keep it round. And I might pull a little bit of a little tickle and blot with a damp brush, just to bring out some of the lighter edges. You can actually hear my brush kind of scratching along the paper. I'm just tickling it softly, just to give it a little lift. And from there, if I want, I can come in with a bigger brush and really define some of these other edges. I could leave it like this. I mean, this is cute on its own. I'm going to actually take a little snapshot and get a shot of that. And now let's bring in a bigger brush. In fact, I might try out this big old cat tongue brush. It's called an oval wash, but it looks like a cat tongue. And bring in some darks up here, and then some of my, more grass green down here. So let's begin with this grass green, which comes along the lower bit of the picture. I'm going to use some of my cobalt turquoise and Hansa yellow, which makes a nice little spring green. And I want a consistency, I want it a little heavier than what was on the actual cherub. So I'm going to really work to get a decent sized puddle here. All right, so let's go and we'll start right here. I haven't used this brush before, so I've been wanting to try this out. So we're just going to carve around his figure. And when you've got a nice big brush like this, you can cover a lot of territory. So we're going to carve around that pedestal. And let's move that picture. And I'm going to move this to kind of suit myself. Let's see. I think I got this coming in part of the head. I'm going to carve around that elbow. I'm going to bring that out here. Let's pick up some more pigment. Bring that down the shin. I think I'm liking this brush. It's pretty fun. It just gives me a lot of pigment to move around, a lot of paint, and I can move it pretty quickly, which is a great thing when you're trying to cover the surface of paper. So I'm going to mix up a little more. Let's drop some of that in. Come around the edge of this pedestal. I want to catch that. I might have left this too long and might have a little hard edge here. So the nice thing about using a larger brush, and you can cover more territory, so you won't have dried edges unless you just totally ignore something and leave it be. All right, so I want to get this darker bit up near the top. So, this is, deep shadows underneath trees. I'm going to bring in some ultramarine blue. I always like that in my dark shadowy areas. So let's see, let's come right about that top bit of that wing. I'm just going to bring that out here. And we're just going to carve it around the tips of that, those feathers that we see. This is where it gets really fun. Let's bring that down his back. You can kind of blend into that edge. There's going to be a hard edge because that, has been dry for a while. But I'm going to see if I can keep this, keep from having any hard edges on here. So I may have to grow my puddle a little bit. That's the importance of keeping as big a puddle as you can manage. Now there's some little curls on his head, so let's see if we can paint, some just around some curl shapes. If I need a little bit more ultramarine blue, I want to darken that a bit. Yeah, like that. Now I'm looking at him upside down, so I'm probably missing some things. So let's get this, continue to get this going. Make sure I've got. So I want to get, I don't want that edge to dry hard, like this stuff. So I'm going to just sweep really quickly. This edge, I already knew it was going to be hard because it's sort of a, more defined bit. So we've got that defined. Now, while this is going on, I can still add some things, maybe deepen some of this back here. I don't want to add too many layers with the ultramarine blue, because one thing that the ultramarine will do, it's a granulating color. And while it's transparent, those granulated layers, one or two are going to look great. But if you keep piling on the layers of ultramarine, all that granulation, sometimes it can tend to get a little cloudy. So we're just going to lay that in. That's going to be our little dark forest behind him. I might, since the edge of this is relatively wet, maybe come in with a little transition color. Let's see how that looks. Again, I don't want to do too much monkeying around here. Let me just dampen that brush and then see if I can just soften this edge a little bit. And I think I might be kind of happy with that. Because it is, you know, kind of going off into the distance. And as I'm looking at it, I'm trying to see if there's anything else that I want to change or if I'm happy enough. I think I want to add a little bit of depth here. It just seems like it's floating out nowhere. And even though it kind of does here too in the photo, it's maybe a little bit deeper, not much, but let's add a little bit of depth in here. I want to make sure I've got a big enough puddle, and I don't want to go too dark. I don't want to go as dark as that. Let's test it on here. It's still kind of watery. I want to bring a little more body to it. Maybe that'll do it. Let's just have a try. Now, okay, I think this is just about it for me. You can play with different lawn shapes. If you happen to make a little, I see a little splat of green when I laid down some of these grassy tones, and I want to pull that speck up. So what I'm going to do is going to take a damp brush. I'm going to do a little bit of a tickle and blot. And there he's gone. Okay. And I'm not crazy about how that toe is poking out. I want to paint up to the toe. Maybe past the toe. And up to the edge of the sphere. So right now I'm just noodling along, and sometimes, you know, it's best not to noodle. It's just best to leave well enough alone. Sometimes noodling can get you, you know, things that you regret from just going too far. Okay, so there you have it. There is our little angel, our little cherub, and a little bit of a cast shadow, imaginary stuff. His face is a little bit different. Again, it's not a portrait. It's just a quick sketch of a cherub statue. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed that. And I hope you'll try, you know, some different figures and statues, painting statues or sculptures. If you have a museum near you where you can do that, they're a lot of fun. We've got the Slater Museum near us in Norwich, and many times the Sketchers group will go in and paint there. So as I look over my little cherub, you know, I see things that maybe I could tweak a little bit. I think there's a darker shadow underneath that. When this is bone dry, I think this is dry. Let's see if I can just lay in a little bit more of a cast shadow underneath this foot. Just to darken that. I don't want to get too close to that edge of the green though, because it, if I hit the green, it's gonna run. and it'll all fuse together. So I'm going to soften this. There we go. So as you sit and kind of let it rest and you're looking at them, you're going to see things that, okay, I need a little more cast shadow here. I need a little less there. And so you'll see things that you do want to change, and that's okay. You can change things. When I get to this point where I do see little things that I want to change, I wait till everything's bone dry before I start making too many changes. Because if I go in and there's areas that are still wet, it's going to, they'll fuse together in areas that you don't want it to fuse. So there we go. So now we've got our cherub, and you can play and pick and poke, and it's a lot of fun. I can add more curls, all kinds of stuff. But there's our little cherub. All right, thanks for sticking with me and trying out this little cherub. And I hope you continue all your fun. All right, we'll see ya. Thanks.